Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Anthropology 415, 515 Ethnographic Methods. It is the 15th of November. It's Friday of week 13. Today, we're finishing up our discussion of coding and analysis. We're going to have some time to practice with the interface here. Then we're going to look maybe have some time to look at your own field notes if you brought some in, and we'll try to code those as well. And I'll show you some examples from my field notes, as well as Jose will show you some from his. We were also, you have your PowerPoint due today. Remember, if you are an in-person student, you just turn in the PowerPoint through Canvas, and then you'll give your presentation live, and we'll record you in class. If you are an online student, you'll turn in both your PowerPoint itself as well as a link to a YouTube. Put your videos on YouTube and send me the link because Canvas won't accept a video that big. Send me YouTube links, make sure that they have permission for everyone to view them. Then I'll build them into viewing lists and we'll view them together as a class over the course of the next week or two. When you do your PowerPoints, just a couple reminders. Make sure that you don't have just big blocks of text, right? You're not just copying and pasting from your paper if you've already written that. But you do want to include exemplar quotes. We're going to talk about quotes today and why they're important, but that's really your evidence when you're doing ethnographic fieldwork. So whether it's quotes from your research subjects, from your interviews, from your life histories, or even from some of the background literature that you have, make sure to give some of those quotes to us rather than just telling us what people said. The other thing that we've seen in the past that kind of trips people up is make sure that you are doing your PowerPoint in a very creative way, right? Like use the background functions. Don't just put basic text on there, and make sure you have some kind of image on every slide. And this should be pertaining to what your topic is. So if you have a slide on survey, show us a copy of your survey. If you have, a pile sort, show us, the taxonomic trees that people created from your pile sort. Show us the data, right? Just don't tell us about it. Whether it's quotes or whether it's through images, really the point of a PowerPoint beyond a paper is not just to do like the rough draft version or the outline version, but to make it interactive and to utilize the different modalities available to you. So those will be turned in. They're due tonight, and we'll start next week watching those videos both live and on the video machine. Okay, so today we're going to finish up our discussion of field notes and how we code them. So we'll be looking at a couple different ways. We'll be looking at continue looking at Atlas TI. We talked about this last time. Let's see, your license manager, where we are. So we're going to take a look again. You don't have to use a program to do this. You can do kind of the paper version of this, but either way, this is going to be the same kind of process, right? Whether you are doing it digitally or in an analog way. I'm going to share my screen right now. So remember last time we talked about how when you're doing analysis of your research, right? At this point, this is the last week of lecture or of new content lecture that we're going to do, because at this point you've collected all the data, or at least you should have started collecting all the data, right? You've done interviews, you've done participant observation, you've done digital ethnography, you've done pile sorts, you've done textual analysis, you've done all these different things, life histories, everything. And so what do we do with this, right? You've kind of collected it either physically or digitally. You have either a bunch of printouts from transcripts that you've transcribed, or you have them all saved as Word docs on a folder. So what do I do with this, right? So the next step, like we said last time, is to collect them all into one place. And this can either be physically, like back in my day, I had like binders, like 3-ring binders, and I would print out all this stuff and do a 3-hole punch and had like the tabs with you put in between different things, so you could easily flip between, oh, this is interview 1 and interview 2, and this is January field notes, February, and then I would like go through and highlight important stuff and write in the margins, right? By the time I started, that was for my master's. By the time I got to my PhD, I had switched over to a digital system, something like this. But the process is the same. It's almost this like mimetic recreation of the process of what we used to do, right? So instead of collecting all your field notes into a 3-ring binder, you put them all into either a folder or now you upload them to the cloud. Rather than highlighting them in physical reality with highlighting pens, now you're highlighting them on the computer, and rather than writing memos kind of in the margins, you can do that as well. And so here, again, here's from the web version. I have the old version on a computer. This is the newer version you can run from the cloud. All these documents have been uploaded. Here's interview 1. Here's another interview. Here's some field notes, right? You can also not just do Word documents. You can do pictures. You can do videos. You can do whole websites, anything like that, right? Can be coded. So then you will go through and you're going to code these things. And we talked about coding and how the kind of the mechanics are and how you can code, right? You highlight a certain piece of text and you put the type of code that you'd like to put on there. And then it can collate those and index them, and you can pull up, all the times that it talks about the 27 instances where it talks about leased land versus communal land, or the 18 times that it talks about agriculture. It tells you in the corner here how many it is. So I had Jose make a copy of one of his interviews, and we're going to have a little opportunity now, just to spend a couple minutes for those 2 of you in class to come up here and try the interface out and see how you can code things and how you like the process of doing it. So do you want to explain the interface a little bit, Jose? Show them which buttons to press.
So you're gonna the web version is a little bit different than like the downloaded version. So this is come over here. So the web version is a little bit easier, while of course the document version or the downloaded version is a bit harder. But anyway, so as you can see, the interview is right here. This Pop interview. Pop was one of the prominent figures in the village. And you see what was 92%? Well, that's the rate that the recorder that I had, the app that I had, got. Now, why I say 92%? Because there's certain words like Macacaba Jose. That's hi Jose, how are you? Or my name is Macacaba. Macacaba Jose. As my name is Jose. He's like Macacaba Pop. My name is Pop. So there's certain things that does that. And the CI will look at those words, it's English, Spanish, Maya, whatever it is, and it'll try to change it. Anyways, cool. So let's say we want to talk about land ownership. Let's keep going down. This is just fun. Say this one. Let's say you have land ownership. So what you would do, you want to try, you can go right here, press this thing. Then you can insert an image, insert a list, or insert a quotation. But we don't want to do that. What we want to do is insert a comment. So what I'm going to let you guys do is you just click on it. So whichever one you just click on it right here. And then you can add a comment. So read it and add any comment you want. You can add a new code right here, or you can even add from your previous codes. But just read it real quick, and then you put it in yourself.
And try to figure out what codes. Do you have one without any codes on it, like a
blank one?
Yeah, just like give them a quote or two and then see, then they can look at the code list and try to put it into a certain code or figure out which codes fit. Fit with which quotes. Didn't have to be much, it's like 2 or 3 quotes. They can just try to connect them to your code list.
Do my land policy, try that one.
Yeah, just find just a set of quotes without.
No, I'm gonna do that one.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard because it's not.
Okay. Let's find one with less code in it. Here. This interview was horrible, so let's do this one. This Francisco's neck is a horrible interview. It was raining, it was a thunderstorm, and I hear it's
Pablo's boy.
yeah, because he owns a bunch of farmlands now. Yeah. It was a shit ton of cacao. All right, cool. So we have this quote. So let's find one without it, like this one right here.
So yeah, just look through a couple of quotes, and you can even do different ones because there's going to be plenty. And then just try to like highlight them, and then use the coding feature and try to figure out which codes they go with. And then you can also type in the comment box like what you think it's about, what the point of that quote is.
I guess I didn't even do that one. Jesus Christ. Stop with me. They're all. That was too long. That was too long.
They can just be part of it. Doesn't matter.
All right, cool. We do a long ass interview. Let's do this one. This guy's cool. You made me laugh all the time. There we go. All right.
There's no right answers. It's
Yeah.
just practice using the interface so you can kind of see it instead of hear me talk about it.
You see sometimes in my interviews, they get really nervous. I have to like keep going and going and going and going and going. And boom, boom, they give me a big old quote. But yeah, it's not fun sometimes. I don't know. Just God dang it.
Big one.
All right, cool, whatever. All right, there you go. So let's delete these real quick. And then you guys can go put them back in. If it lets me. Because it's weird.
And this will, and you can undo these changes, right?
Yeah, I can do it whenever I want. It doesn't take that long. All right, so you have this quote, very important quote. Read it, you highlight it. So you right click on it, highlight, and then you put your own codes. You do your own thing, and stuff like that. You can even group codes. So
Yeah, so each of you do a couple, like 2 or 3 of
just pick whatever.
those quotes. Try to figure out what codes would go with that. Either the ones Jose uses, probably they're going to be the right codes, or if you think of something that Jose didn't think of.
Yeah. So like read a quote.
Add those as well.
And those have you highlight it right there. So you find code or add comment. So the top one's find code. So you're gonna add a comment. The comment is to that you're gonna add a comment to the quotation. So that's not really a code. That's like this quote is important because of this.
Or if you're like, hey, this quote reminds me of this thing that somebody else said, make sure to check, there's a parallel quote over at Justino's interview.
Yeah, check Justino's interview. Check Pop's interview.
Or this is the opposite of what somebody else said. Check that.
Yeah.
A lot, like just to kind of like meta analysis of what's going on.
There's no right or wrong answer.
This person was drunk when they said this.
You want to put a code on, right? The code goes up here. The very top of it. The very top is the code. And then boom, there's codes there. You can create your own code.
But look through the ones that he has first, because
some of them are AI. Go very bottom, all are AI.
There's a lot of things. So probably
go back up.
Make yours at this point, but if you were like starting from scratch, you just have a blank list.
These are the top ones that you're gonna have right now.
Yeah, and the number tells you how many times it needs to use that, so you can kind of see what are the.
You see 1, 2, that's AI. The one I showed you guys how AI messes everything up. And then you put
there.
Say code. And then what you can do is add another code to it. You can add 2 codes to it. You can add 3 codes to it. You can add 4 codes to it. Yeah, whatever.
It's the nice thing about doing it on the computer, right? Versus if you were cutting it up and taking them together in documents. This way, they can go into multiple.
So there, you talk about agriculture. We're going to put ecology, common criteria, dangers, foundation, boom, boom, and then all of a sudden, then you put, well, whatever, boom, there they are.
Oh.
So now you try it, Ava.
And once you're done with this, I'll show you what happens when you click on those codes. You can output them.
Oh, what's don't. Cool. So let's find you another quote. Let's talk about, here we go. So traditions. Let's talk about traditions. Read it, and then you can make your own codes. Here you go. I want to get Christina, but I'm doing that.
Oh, secrets.
Yeah. Well, you like tweet this to do that. Like, Okay. So I did a crap with it. I'm pretty stacked up on it.
What was it about all that stuff?
Yeah, about all the stuff, how he works for the government. I'm like, crap, dude, it's perfect. And like, you can't use it. I'm like, I'm not recording it exactly. I should have recorded it. I still use some of it though. Another one will be community. Another one will be community.
I don't see that.
It's right below.
Right below the common traditions.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
So when it comes to certain things, like when you talk about their college position, for example, like your Yorona, you can even put a community one for yours. Let's put quote. There you go. So, for example, the other thing like it's community, right? Well, it's an ancestral system, blah, 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 but it is part of the community. It's been part of all the Maya communities for hundreds of years already. So that's another thing you put in there. So like you never thought community would be one until you do it over and over again. You're like, oh my God, this is part of the community. So then as you go back in there, it's not that hard because you go as tradition, and boom, it shows up. And then you go in there and add another quote. Let's say you don't want a quote anymore. Let's say like, oh, I don't think it's responsible. Just delete it, delete it, delete it. And it's pretty easy. Another thing about this is, I don't know, the thing about all this is that it does save everything. The fun part is, so like you see, Kayla, she went, she did her own research with archaeology. We can put like field notes like right here. So these are my field notes. They're pretty short field notes because I condensed it down.
Did you do your field notes on your phone or did you bring a laptop?
On my phone, I'm like, there's no way I was gonna charge the laptop there.
Yeah.
So like this is all.
Aren't asking
No, you're gonna have any charge. So for example, I cut down. I had a notes document that was literally like 50 pages. Now I'm not gonna put 50 pages on this. So what I did was I found certain quotes in my research. You gotta read it all again. I put it in here. For example, I also mentioned some hostilities between villagers that are part of the Green Creek Co-op and that they're not all involved with whatever. But you can put your own things in here, and these are important too because for law enforcement, you click on it, and this will show up with the other ones. If that makes any sense. But yeah, so it's like pretty simple. It's not hard. It does cost a lot of money. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, but if you guys do any ethnographic research, I would recommend STI.
Well, that's good. You don't have to pay for it all at once now, like you did. You could rent it by the month and usually spend a month or two coding your field notes, and then you have access to it. You just can't keep adding things after a certain point. You can always resubscribe.
But yeah.
The other nice thing is that we talked last time about like you should make sure that like having a code that has like 500 instances isn't particularly useful, like cacao and all too many. Also having like one code like Mr. Soup's cacao like doesn't really like help you because it's just one thing. But with Atlas is neat because you can take code like cacao and you can make a code tree or code family. So it's cacao, and then underneath it can have like cacao religion, cacao economics, cacao and family. And then when you output it, like I'll show you in a second, you can tell it to output at different levels. So kind of give me all the quotes about cacao, or you can say just give me cacao and religion, or just cacao, religion, and underneath that I could have Catholic and Protestant. And so you can aggregate and disaggregate kind of at different stages, which is always kind of nice. And then once you do that, once you've done the codes, you can stay up here. You can click output and you click on your codes and it will yeah. So it'll take all your codes. So for instance, this is, let's see what this is, my environmental knowledge, right? So rather than being, these are all from field notes or from interviews, and rather than being kind of set where they are, like in context, it pulls out all the places that you coded. And this can be, sometimes, you can do whole paragraphs, sometimes it's one sentence, sometimes it's even less than that. It'll tell you where it's from. So this is from my February 2011 field notes. And it tells you, this is document number 435. And if you have any memos that you wrote about it. And then it tells you, when it pulls these quotes, it tells you what codes. So this is in my environmental knowledge, which is the output that I told you. Give me all outputs that have this code. There's 34 of them. But it also is coded for cacao pruning and like I said, you can have these codes and then super codes. So it's cacao pruning, but it's also in like the big cacao category, right? So while this was like part of a long, field note, while we were talking, I asked Simeon if other farmers gave him help for pruning in science. He says a real struggle, especially from Green Creek, but now they're seeing the results. He told me some farmers argue with him, like the one who said witch's broom isn't a fungus. It's what you call auto shading between trees. It's like a witch's broom. people hear terms and have vague context and reapply these terms in their own perspectives, right? So rather than, this was in the middle of like 1,000 or 2,000 words, like, here's what I did today, here's who I talked to. But you can kind of, once you pull these out, it's easier to see the connections, right? Like, if I had to pull out, this is February, March, April, May, June, so like 6 or 7 months of stuff. It would be hard to find these things kind of on their own, but when it's just pulled out, it's easier to see. Some of these are really long. This is about planting corn, and so it's like I went to plant corn this day, and there was just a ton of stuff, that people were talking about, like, oh, here's how you make your digging stick, and here's how you plant, here's all the stuff that you do. Well, other times it can be like one or two sentences like this, like the stars, right? Like the star you see in the morning, Venus, is called Abraham's sun, whatever that means, right? So it can be anything kind of from the level of really big to really small. It can also be stuff that's not necessarily field notes. This is like a paper that I did for class on like a human environmental class about Maya and nature. And so I put that in there because I knew I might be using that kind of stuff, in my dissertation. You can also do, I think I have some interviews in here as well. You can do charts, right? I made this chart one day, I like drew out because it was raining, I didn't have anything to do. So I drew out like a difference between industrial cacao, agro, organic, and traditional cacao and put that in there. You can also do things like interviews. I thought I had some. So I don't. Videos, pictures, anything like that. So we got 15 minutes or so. Did you bring anything?
Yeah, I brought some.
Okay. Did you bring anything? Cool. So what we'll do is just get a couple samples, like a couple pages with different kinds of things on it, and then we'll take a second and switch with each other, and then you go through and you code it, and then we'll give it back to each other, and then see if you would code the same way, or see if that's how you would code, or if there's something different that kind of emerges, right? So let's do that, and then we'll take a look at what you coded. We're going to pause it right here. Those of you who are watching the video, maybe take a second. If you have your field notes, take a look at them. And if you have someone else who can take a look at them in order to give you some feedback on them and what kind of codes might be interesting or important for yours or seem emergent from your work, this would be a good opportunity to do that. All right, we've taken just a few minutes to look at each other's field notes. We've done about 3 items for each one, explained what those items were to the other person, then had them take a look and see if they came up with any codes, what codes they came up with. And then, what was that?
They asked me what they want to know. No, I think it's JAWS first.
What?
They asked me what they want to do from, oh, we think JAWS, code JAWS first.
Yeah.
Talking about that.
Okay. Well, did you code each other's?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Did you code your own?
We coded our own.
Okay, well, let's do that instead. What did you code?
So some things that I found in wolf coding is that, like I said, like narration, like unease, or like feelings of unease. There's a code that I wanted to put that would just be like Portalis, but I felt like that was too long.
Portalis.
Yeah, just Portalis, because like there's a lot of people
Uh-huh.
talking about.
I think that's good. Because remember, you can always do nested codes too. So you could do Portalis as a big code because maybe you got people talking about Portalis versus Clovis. You want to sort those, but within Portalis, you could have Roosevelt Hall, admin, or even ENMU could be within that, like, right? Portalis, then underneath is like ENMU and rest of town, and then within ENMU can be different buildings. What else did you? Anything else?
That's pretty much.
Okay, so you had some narration, sadness, and then so you had like a feeling, you had like a modality of what was going on, and you had like a location. What about you, Ava? What did you put?
Characteristics of like this
Like what were some of the codes that you picked?
characteristics and then the.
Oh, characteristics you didn't put a specific characteristic.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And again, as you read more of those, right? Characteristics could be a good code in the beginning because you're like, oh, this is really interesting. But as you go through, you could see that, oh, I have too much of this, right? Like I have too many, like 100 of these. And so you could create subfamilies or subcodes that are like within characteristics, like physical characteristics versus like emotional or like, spiritual characteristics. Or you could do like, you could even be really specific. Like these are the people who talked about her hair, her beauty, or her eyes, or whatever, right? Like just kind of depending on how many of these you did. If you did it for a class project, you're probably going to have a couple, versus if you did your PhD dissertation, you're going to have hundreds of these things. Okay. And so we only have a few minutes left, but I did want to kind of talk about like what do we do with all this? So once you've taken all your documents, you've put them into piles, you've gone through them and coded them. I spent a whole semester after I came back from Belize to like go through my field notes, transcribe interviews, and code things, right? The next thing you want to do is to start to see how those codes go together. My big codes, and it looks like Jose's too, end up forming like the basis of chapters in our books. But even in your papers, those codes that you get a lot of are probably going to end up being major themes, right? Like if you have 20 codes on characteristics of La Llorona, that's a good indication that there's going to be a section in your paper called like characteristics of La Llorona, because you have a lot to talk about, right? If you, like Jay, if you're talking about hauntings in Portales, and you want to do ENMU, but you don't have any codes, like if you only have like 2 people talk about ENMU, it's a good indication that it's not. But if you have a ton of stuff and you've ended up dividing it up by building, then that's a good indication that you have enough to like put a section on Roosevelt Hall and a section on Edmund. So once you have your codes and your themes, you want to link them together, and you can do this conceptually. Like I used to just like take paper and draw out like kind of like spider webs between like, oh, cacao economics, that's related to like neoliberalism, it's related to development, right? Like in religions related to Protestantism and missionaries and all these other themes that I'd collected. And you can kind of figure out how this all goes together. And oftentimes there's like this memoing process that goes along with it, where like as you're, I put all my codes once I got them all done on note cards. And I knew I had to create this book that was going to be like 10 chapters long. So I basically took my note cards and put like cacao economics, 28 instances, right? I didn't even put what they were. And I would just lay them out on the ground and be like, oh yeah, economics, that kind of goes with this like changing in diet, right? Because people are buying new food. So I'll stick those cards together, almost like pile sorting for yourself. And then I would type things, right? Like, why did I put all these cards together? I can type, right? Because economics are related to the changing, shop options or options for store-bought food in these communities. I also put a card here called labor and debt because it's related to kind of the expansion of cacao, and that's how it's related to people taking on new debts to expand their holdings, and this has caused economic problems, right? So by kind of thinking out loud, and you can do this with voice memo or by typing, you can start to generate a lot of that stuff, which is like the basis of your paper or your book or whatever you're writing, right? Your paper for this class, because you're thinking about these connections, and then you're actually writing them out, and you're talking about like what are the characteristics of La Llorona, or in Roosevelt Hall, what are the major things that I saw, like, or what are the major stories that people talked about each of these different locations. So you do that. Also talk about places where there's contradiction in this, like when you're writing out like your little memos about what this means, right? Like I have all these codes as you are going through, and you might have made a comment like this is the opposite of what someone else said, or these two things contradict each other, and then you can kind of put that in there as well. The last thing that you want to pay attention to is quotes, and there's been one of the changes from last semester is this semester I've gone through in a couple of your assignments and ask you for exemplar quotes, and these are really our evidence in cultural anthropology, right? And we can say that lots of people in Portales believe in ghosts, but it's much more powerful to have, you can say lots of people believe in ghosts, as one professor at Eastern said, and have a quote that's like, ever since I moved to Portales, I've been scared out of my mind, or something like that, right? It's much more powerful than just you saying, I talked to a lot of people and they were all super scared, right? This is important. It comes from your interviews. It comes from your participant observation. Bless you. It also comes from your background stuff, right? You want to have these quotes that really exemplify your ideas. You don't want to have too many quotes, and they don't want to be super long. You don't want to have like just pages and pages of quotes. You need to explain them. Jose and I talked about this before. You don't want to have like just strings of quotes. Like one person said this, here's a quote, and another said this, and another said this, right? In between your quotes or after your quotes, you really want to spend some time unpacking it. Tell your audience what it means and why you bothered to stick that in there, so it doesn't look like you're just like filling up space, right? And you want to like, yeah, you want to illustrate with your quotes. There's this kind of dialectic back and forth between you talking, using a quote to illustrate your point, and then going back to you talking and explaining what that quote means or why it's important. And finally, there's always this question of like, how direct do you make your quotes? And Jose and I always have this issue when we're working in Belize. Like, do you copy people 100% or do you clean it up a little bit? What are the pros and cons of both, Jose?
Well, the first thing is that you don't clean it up. There's certain ways they say it, right?
Mm-hmm.
For example,
Because they're not English speakers as first language.
yeah, so we'll be like, I call it took corn off. But then like the color said I had to take my corn out of this plot because I was somebody else's farmland. Like that. But then you take the meaning away when you change it sometimes. Sometimes you change it in a way that they didn't mean it, in the way you interpreted it.
Yeah, right. So there's this fine line between like people in Belize, they'll often be like, for she made it like that she like make it. It almost like comes out to like a Yoda speak if you like type it out verbatim, but what she's really saying is she did it that way. And so you have to kind of walk this fine line between like making your people seem, you know, unintelligent, but also like Jose said, changing the meaning. Like if you rewrite it too much, it might not mean the same thing. It really depends on what you're doing. If you're looking at like someone's exact story, like ethnopoetics, you're really concerned about like what the exact words they're using, the phrases, the repetitions, even the pauses and the silence. And then for other things like what we're doing in this class, it can be much broader and you want to kind of clean it up for readability. All the ums and you know, like are people trailing off and starting the sentence again? You can kind of clean that up, but you don't want to change the meaning. You want to make sure that this is really expressing what they said, because again, these are our evidence when we're doing cultural anthropology. We don't have artifacts that we can show like arrowheads or bones like we can in other subdisciplines, but we are showing, you know, our quotes as our evidence. Okay, that's the end of our discussion of coding and analysis. Starting next week, we're going to be doing presentations for those of you in class, I guess on Monday. Would you be ready to present? There's only two of you, so I'm sure we'll get both of you. And then if you are in the class section but you're not here, please be prepared to present. And for the rest of you online, send a YouTube video link. Make sure it has open permission so anyone with the link can view it, because we're going to be viewing them both in class as well as I'll be sending out a view list for those of you who are online so you can view them as well. All right, we are out of time. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next week for the beginning of presentations. See you then. Good luck, and email me if you have any questions about your presentations.